17th century Dutch art at the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. This is not our first engagement with Friso. 2 years ago we had the same team actually. We had a discussion online at the New Bulgarian University in the context of the UniArt Gallery, which was extremely well received, and in fact I might say that probably this our first dialogue that we had triggered the idea to make something bigger, more ambitious. So we really appreciate your engagement, your energy, your passion to communicate and share what you do, how you do it. So old masterpieces for a new audience. Friso Lammertse.
Okay, thank you. Well, first, thanks for inviting me. It's really an honor to be here. So thanks. Secondly, I will not talk about Rembrandt. So this is a Rembrandt Fest, I know. I will mention it a little bit, but not much. But be aware, I will talk about Frans Hals, another 17th century Dutch master, who is a generation older, and Rembrandt is unsinkable without Hals. So if I mention Hals, you can sink about Rembrandt. But I'm going to talk about exhibitions, mainly because the last 4 years I'm quite old, but I'm only working for 4 years at the Rijksmuseum. Before that time I worked at Rotterdam at the Museum of Bulgaria. And during these 4 years at the museum, I mainly worked on 2 exhibitions. And I will talk about these 2 exhibitions, and I think that, well, at least for me, exhibitions are key to every museum at this moment, certainly in Western Europe, the US, and certainly in the Netherlands. It attracts at least more audience and also more attendance from newspapers and so on if you make exhibitions. Without exhibitions, you're not very much in the public discussion and so on. So without these exhibitions, you won't survive, I think. And for the Rijksmuseum, of course, we get really millions of visitors every year, just tourists. But we think it's extremely important to have next to that those exhibitions. They are not meant to attract public in the first instance. Of course, we love if you get a lot of public, but there are things behind these exhibitions which don't have to do that much with audience. Of course, you always think about audience, new audiences, whatever that is, but it is about mainly those exhibitions about what we think about art and how important it is to deal with art. So that's the main reason why I should like to talk about these 2 exhibitions. It is about 2 exhibitions. One is Frans Hals, which is at the moment in the National Gallery in London and will go to Amsterdam within a month or so. So it's just for 1 week in London, and then it will go to Amsterdam. And afterwards, in June, July, it will go to Berlin. So it's a 3-venue exhibition on Frans Hals. So a monographic exhibition about this very famous 17th century artist. The other exhibition is completely different, and I will stress it in this coming hour, about the collection of the Museum Boijmans van Beuningen. I worked still at the Boijmans van Beuningen when the director of the Rijksmuseum asked if he could make an exhibition about the Boijmans collection. So I was first at Rotterdam thinking already about that exhibition, and when I came to Amsterdam, it was more than logic that I was involved in this exhibition. So these are 2 separate exhibitions which show, I think, 2 ways of dealing with art and also thinking about art, which I like to present, and then hopefully we can discuss about it. I will start with Frans Hals. Oh no, this way. The Bulgarian touch, yes. So the Frans Hals exhibition left to see the Rijksmuseum. At the right, the National Gallery in London, where at this moment the Frans Hals exhibition is. Yeah, that
middle
one. The middle,
yeah.
no?
Yeah.
So this is the Frans Hals exhibition at the Rijksmuseum. And I go directly further. Why did we want to make that exhibition? And when I came to the museum in 2020, it was already planned. So it's not an idea of me, it was already planned, and the first thing they said to me, you're gonna make this exhibition. So, but why did the Rijksmuseum want to make it? In the first instance, it was seen as a kind of triptych. And the first in this triptych was the late Rembrandt in 2015. The second, say the middle, was Vermeer exhibition last year. And the third will be the Frans Hals. And these three masters are seen as the three big painters of the 17th century, Dutch painters of the 17th century in the Netherlands. And Rembrandt has stayed always famous, already from the 17th century, but certainly from the 19th century onwards, he was seen as the god of Dutch painting, perhaps. Vermeer only grew at the end of the 19th century, and grew, and after the Second World War, he became perhaps more famous than Rembrandt, perhaps more loved than Rembrandt. Frans Hals is the other way. He was rediscovered, I should say, at the same time as Vermeer in the late 19th century, because of his very fluid and loose brushstroke. The Impressionist, Manet, but also German artists like Liebermann, they loved him because they said, well, this is an artist of 200 years earlier who paints like us. So he was really discovered at that time. And I think till the Second World War, he was really seen as really one of the big masters. But after that time, it diminished. So Rembrandt remained stable, Vermeer went sky high, but the popularity of Hals diminished. And one of the main reasons, I think, why we want to make this exhibition is to show that he is such a great artist. Perhaps we can discuss later why he's not that much loved. We'll see. But we strongly believe, both in London and Berlin and in Amsterdam, that he is really an amazing artist, which should be shown. So that was the main reason. So I divide the lecture in several chapters. So first, of course, and one of the main issues of making an exhibition is making a selection. I don't have the Bulgarian touch. Yes. Hals is a well-researched master. So when you start an exhibition like this, there is lots of books and former exhibitions where you can work on, which you should be aware of, and of course where you have to relate to. So in the past there have been three main really great big exhibitions about Hals. Here you see the three catalogs. In the middle, the 37 exhibition, then the 62 exhibition, and then the 89/90 exhibition. 37 and 62 were in the Frans Hals Museum in Haarlem. The last big one from 89/90 was in Washington, London, and Haarlem again. So Haarlem has always been the main point of Frans Hals exhibitions because he worked there all his life. He was born, by the way, in Antwerp, so he goes very early, when he's just 3-4 years old, to Haarlem, and there he becomes the famous master. Above that, I show you the 3 volumes of the oeuvre catalog of Seymour Slive. That's from 1970, and it's still an amazing book. When you are thinking about Hals, this is the book still to go to. So this also, for me, was holy, more or less. Hals is an interesting artist, a major artist, but he is not very varied. There are about 220 paintings known by him, and about 180 are portraits. And I remember the exhibition of '89. I was nearly 30, And I must confess, I thought it one of the most boring exhibitions I ever saw. So when they told me you have to make a Frans Hals exhibition, I said, okay. But on the other hand, I knew it was a very great master. So that was one of the things, of course, when I first heard it, I said, oh, we have to think about it. And this is what I meant with an exhibition. Piece for piece, these are all amazing paintings. But if you show too much, it becomes too much in an exhibition. An exhibition is not a book. It should be overwhelming in one way, and you should not tell too much. It's not a book. It's really not a book. So, but these are the paintings which is 75% of Hals' oeuvre, is this kind of painting. So it's easy to kill a master like Hals. So it's when you make an exhibition nowadays, it's certainly not certainly of a painter like Hals. It can't be a scientific overview. It doesn't work for the present public. So that was the first thing we thought about. We made the exhibition together with the National Gallery in London, and my curator, my colleague in London, Bart Cornelis, who is also Dutch, by the way, we had exactly the same opinions about it. So it was easy to discuss those things. When I started, that was, say, 4 years ago, but already 2 years before, the Rijksmuseum and the National Gallery had said, we will cooperate together to make this exhibition. And Bart Cornelis had made a kind of first choice of 80 paintings. And that's a lot. And we were both convinced that was too much. So one of the first things I did, so it's perhaps good to say, we worked separately in the beginning about our choice, and then we combined it again, and then we discussed it. So I got those 80 from Bart, and then I continued in Amsterdam, also with my colleagues and my former colleagues, to discuss it. So what I did, I printed out all 80 paintings on A4, and that's quite a lot. So they were lying on the floor, and then together with people, we just said, what should we certainly have, what is perhaps too much, what is double. And so I should just show you how it works. So when it's blank, we changed it around, so we didn't want to have it anymore. Of course, we kept them because this is the ideal exhibition. Yeah, you see, and of course, you don't get everything. So this is the first thing. We came up with about 60. That's still too much. We wanted to go to 50, but of course, it was a well way to start with. Just to show you that we had the job was to make a Frans Hals exhibition, but for an instance, not more than 2 months, I thought, shouldn't we add Judith Leister? Because she is a pupil or assistant of Hals, we don't know. And of course a female artist, which are very popular at this moment, and a very good artist, and also different from Hals, but also sometimes very looking the same almost. There are really discussions sometimes, is this Judith Leister or Hals? But at the end, and I think rightly so, we discussed not to do it. The oeuvre of Judith Leister is very small. It's about 24, 25 paintings we know of. And if you hang it next or in separate rooms next to the Hals, I think Hals would overwhelm. These are big paintings and many. And so we decided at the end, Judith Leister gets her own small exhibition at the moment. I think that's more fair to her, and also more fair to Frans Hals. But that's the way. It's more an example of how you think. You should always think about, well, what the audience wants, what you think is at this moment interesting for an exhibition. As I said, you come up with a kind of ideal. You make a kind of list, you discuss it, and then you think, well, how do we get all those paintings? The most easy are in the more famous museums. If you work for as long in a museum as I do, you know almost everybody in every important museum. My near colleagues, the curators of old masters. So you just call them or mail them and say, hey, is this painting available or not? You never get the answer yes, but they say, probably just write a letter and we will do the utmost best. So that's the easiest way. But the more interesting way is, or the more adventurous part, is the private collectors. And Frans Hals paintings there are quite a lot very good paintings in private hands still. For example, in England. And we have more or less the tradition, you could say, that we want to see every painting in real if we want to show it in the exhibition. And of course, we knew, Bart and I, quite a lot of paintings, but some we had only seen once. For example, this painting, this still life, only at the '89 exhibition and never after. So we decided to go there and also to other places. It was Corona time, so it was quite difficult. So traveling was not that easy, but this was a very nice trip, I must say. This was a private house on the border of England and Wales. So it took from London a train and then a taxi. And when we arrived at the grounds, there were dozens of pheasants. The taxi had really to escape some pheasants. And the nice thing, we came around lunch, so what did we get on lunch? A pheasant, and it was below that painting. So it's rather a remarkable visit. The thing why you do these things is because it's nice, but also, of course, to see the painting, but on the other hand, also that you can discuss with the private collector if he wants to lend the painting. And they were very nice and said, yeah, of course, we want to do it. But the good thing of the National Gallery, they offered to clean the painting and also to make another frame, which is more. This is not an original 17th century frame, but in the style of 17th century, and it's really a complete different painting. By the way, this is a painting by Hals. That's the girl, but the still life is by somebody else, Klaas van Heusen. You would never have heard of him. A Haarlem master who died very early, but a very great master. So this was one of the nice visits. Another one was to Germany, on the border of the Netherlands. I don't mention the name also of the other one, because private people are reluctant, but it was an amazing castle where it was. And there this fisher boy was. And I wanted to show it to you because it was a nice trip, but also because those fisher boys, it's an interesting point. So my colleague, we were more or less on the same opinion about all the paintings, but my colleague Bart Cornelis in London said, I don't want this painting. I think it's ugly. I think it's terrible. And I say, that's exactly the reason why I want to have it. This painting, before the Second World War, was seen as one of the great, great paintings of Frans Hals. But after the war, I think the taste changed so much. And a lot of people even don't believe it's 17th century. And there are still today quite a lot there are some scholars who think they are all fakes. And that's interesting. Yeah? They don't resemble most of the other genre paintings, these fisher boys. And I think they resemble too much socialist art and Nazi art even. And we, after the Second World War, and after the 80s, we are very reluctant with this kind of painting. But this is absolute 17th century painting, and I think, a very beautiful one. So perhaps you have sometimes to skip your own taste, but I don't know. This is my colleague, he was Peter Roelofs. He is my predecessor at my function, and he still works at the Rijksmuseum, so we went together to see this painting, because we had never seen it. So, and this is also, of course, nice for an exhibition. This painting has not been seen since 1960 or so. So for the first time in 80 years, it will be on show. But only in Amsterdam, not in London. Also, they were very willing to lend. I said most of the museums are very willing, but sometimes you have tough discussions about lending or borrowing things. And the most problematic for this exhibition was the Frans Hals Museum in one way. And they were very nice, and my colleagues were also very nice, but it's mostly in the higher levels of these kind of museums that some reluctance was the case. And this was also in the Frans Hals Museum. And of course, we could understand it directly. Yeah? As said, all the major exhibitions of the 20th century on Frans Hals were in the Frans Hals Museum. It is the Frans Hals Museum. So why the Rijksmuseum wants to our painter? And the idea behind it was that, well, Rijksmuseum is the national museum. We never made a Frans Hals exhibition. Wouldn't it be good for him to show it in Amsterdam, in the major museum, but also in London? And we had not the first instance that idea, but also in Berlin. So 3 major cities. And that's, of course, also very good for Haarlem, for the Frans Hals. That's what we stressed. And they said, come on. In the beginning, later we are still very good friends, and we were. But why is the Frans Hals Museum crucial? It is a city museum. It's not like the Van Gogh. They don't have a complete overview of the Frans Hals paintings, but they have all the major group portraits, all the paintings which were commissioned by the city, more or less, are still in that museum. So they have 5 militia pieces, and they are the big ones. These are the major paintings, which are never ever elsewhere to see. So these 3, these 2, and then they have these 2, 3 group portraits. So without these, you can't make a Frans Hals exhibition. So I discussed it first with the curator, and he said, well, you can have whatever you want. But my director is different. So then it was up to the directors, and at the end, we came to a kind of solution. And it's never money involved, not direct money, but of course you can promise restorations. And the most usual thing is when we ask things from you, you can ask major things from us. That's the point, how you can discuss things and how you have this kind of discussions. I already mentioned Berlin several times, but in first instance, the idea was to make this exhibition only in London and Amsterdam. But Berlin has, perhaps next to the Frans Hals Museum, the best collection of Frans Hals paintings. And this is because of Wilhelm van Bode, a famous director, one of the great art historians ever. But he wrote his thesis as a young man on Frans Hals. So when he became director of the Gemälde Gallery, he acquired the best of the best. And these are only 3 of, I think, the 12 paintings by Frans Hals they have. And asking 3 paintings of one artist from one museum is a little bit too much, almost. But we tried to, and they were reluctant. And they said, okay, the boy with the whistle, you can have. That's no problem. But the other 2, they are extremely fragile. I don't think we can. So then the directors came and we discussed things. It was at the moment that also the Vermeer exhibition was still taking place. And there were also discussions about the Vermeer paintings from Berlin still. And then at the end, I think what took Berlin over to our side is that you can become the 3rd venue if you want. And they said, okay, we do it. And then we could get these 3 paintings. The Berlin exhibition will be a little bit different because we started already 5 years ago, and this is only 2 years ago. And they have also another idea about exhibitions. So they want also show the Nachtleben, so also 19th century artists which were influenced by Hals, and also pupils of Hals. So they are a little bit different in the idea also of what a Hals exhibition is. And this is my last about negotiations. When we asked for the Louvre, which has these 2 major paintings, they said, okay, but not both to both venues. So that was before Berlin was involved. So you should choose. Amsterdam can have one of these and London can have one of these. And these are really very important paintings. I will not explain why, but for Hals, these are really very important paintings. And then Berlin was added and became the third venue. And the nice thing is, the Louvre had asked for 3 extremely important paintings from Berlin, just a few months before that. And then the Louvre and the Berlin director said to the Louvre director, okay, you can have them, but then those 2 should go to all 3 venues. That's very nice of her. I know colleagues who don't do this, but she said it for all 3 of us, and that's the reason why we got them. So these are examples of negotiating. Yeah? And Hals is relatively easy, I must say. Rembrandt and Vermeer are, and then you have Caravaggio and these kind of are far more difficult. This is easy stuff for negotiators. Okay, of course, then the next thing is you have those paintings you want, you have sent your letters, you know more or less what will come, and then you have to make your grouping. What you want to show, when. And most of these shows, and I must say I'm very much in favor of it, are chronological, so that you see the development of an artist from this is Hals in the beginning and this is Hals at the end. So a very clear development from very almost stiff to extremely loose. This is more loose than Manet. This is at the end of his life. He's really in his 80s, 60, 64. So yeah, still amazing that he painted this kind of stuff. But in between, there is not much difference in Hals' style. So you have that late style, the early style, and in between it's very comparable. So chronological doesn't make that much sense. And it's also very difficult there are a lot of discussions. He doesn't date that much of what date on what painting. So it doesn't make sense to do it chronological. And then you have to go thematically. And we have 10 rooms in the spaces where we have the exhibitions in the Rijksmuseum. So of course, you have to think about directly what kind of groupings you made. Every room should have its own grouping. I will go through it quite quick because I have to talk also about Boijmans. So the introduction room is just one painting. We do it quite often, and this is perhaps the most famous painting of Frans Hals in the Rijksmuseum. It's extremely loose, and the good thing also is that there is discussion, is this a portrait or a genre painting? And these are exactly the 2 things Hals paints. He never painted, almost never painted a religious scene, no still lifes. So you directly show what's Hals is about, and really, of course, a stunning painting. Then the next room is those pendants, his major works, or at least the most he made of. And then we chose what we think the most important, and also from throughout the whole time. And the earliest paintings known by him are those 2 on the left, for example. So there is a little bit of chronology, as you will see. The next room is large, so these are the paintings we got from the Frans Hals Museum, and it's about militia paintings also. The 3rd and 4th room are about his genre paintings, and the amazing thing is that Hals paints always laughing people, or almost always laughing people when he made genre paintings. And his genre paintings are in a way also a kind of portraits. They are these portraits of a music maker, of a flutist, of an actor. They were not commissioned as a portrait. Hals must have taken the idea to make these paintings for the open market. So in a sense, they are not real portraits, but he always focuses on one person, on how he looks. So he, in essence, even if we called it now genre paintings, he is a genre painting. And the other room is our other, laughing people, but also genre paintings. Then we have a small room with the beautiful Berlin painting, with a large painting from Thyssen, the most beautiful family group there is, and 2 small paintings. And we know from inventories that Hals painted his own children for this genre paintings. Dus we are not completely sure, but it's very likely that those two musicians are his children. It's about because of this mentioning in 17th century documents, but also we know that they were very good musicians. So a biographer of Hals says that his children loved to play music. So that's another reason to think that these might be his own children. And then we have one small room, a very small room. So these are really very small paintings. So this is not about. This is really about the rooms which makes you hang things, not about another idea, perhaps. Then, in the 17th century, female portraits are 99% always part of another, of a husband, but men had them painted themselves only. And Hals was very popular, and these are very flamboyant paintings. They belong to his most famous paintings also. So we have one of the biggest rooms with not that many paintings, only of this man going solo. Here there are no pendants with wives to this painting. They were really made as separate paintings of those men. And then a little bit of chronology, the last two paintings, and this is really 64, so 3 years before his death, are these amazing two paintings from Haarlem. So this is the grouping. Now, quickly something about the design. The design in London is different from that in Amsterdam. They have a different designer. Here I show you the Rotterdam, an overview of one of the rooms in Rotterdam. And because, of course, it has to still to be made, I show you some screen prints from the design of the designer of the Frans Hals exhibition. That's Jean-Michel Wilmot. It's a French designer. It's a big company. They have more than 200 people working for them. And he's quite famous. And more or less the major shows in the Rijksmuseum are done by him. And he did the remodeling of the Rijksmuseum in 2013. So we worked already a long time with him. And our directors do love him immensely. I found personally it's quite difficult because they work in Paris, and it's a very big company. It's not a real discussion, or it could be easily. They are amazing designers, but I will show you the Rotterdam exhibition was made differently, and that's more direct in one way. But they did it will become extremely beautiful. So I give you some overviews. They give us this kind of overview so that we know how it will look. This is of course important that we know how the exhibition will look like, but it is also important because you must know that when the paintings come to the museum, they always come with a courier. And when I started 30 years ago, the courier came and we unpacked it. We looked at the condition, and then they left it. And we could even change things in the rooms. But nowadays, when a courier comes, it's unpacked, condition report, and then he wants to be there when it's hangs. So every painting has its fixed place already. So we have to know beforehand where all the paintings should be. So this is the small room, and this is the man going solo with at the end the Walls collection painting, which is a marvelous painting. And this is the bookshop, also very important. But that will be completely different. No, but it gives at least an idea. I will end and go to Rotterdam, but just to show you, we worked with London, and we do almost everything the same. It's a little bit different, the paintings we show. Also, the design is different, but still more or less the same. So it's in minor things that there are differences, and this is, I think, very nice. This is the catalog cover, and the director, and inside it's completely the same, but the director of the National Gallery thought the focusing of the Dutch one too focused, and he said, no, I don't want this. I want to see more of the painting of the Louvre. But our director said, Hals, that's about guts. Hans Hals is a painter who takes risks. I want to show this with this cover. So it's more personal. It's not going very deep, but it does say something about how people think about covers of catalogs, but of paintings. And just to show you. Okay, it's time to go to another exhibition. So this is the exhibition, the second exhibition about the collection of the Museum Boijmans van Beuningen at the Rijksmuseum, which is still for 1 week on show. I made it with a group of curators, 5 curators. That's quite a lot, but it was incredible to work with and to discuss the whole exhibition, and I think it made it much better that we were with such a big group. But it's an extreme luxury. I said I worked at the Boijmans, and then there were only 8 curators at the Rijksmuseum. There are 40. So that's amazing. In the Netherlands, you don't have any museum with so many. But also the luxury that you can discuss with 4 or 5 curators and work on it, it's amazing. And yeah, it was really a very special joy to make this exhibition. So here again, selection. But of course, this is completely different from the Frans Hals. This is about 150,000 objects, from Middle Ages to the most contemporary artists, from applied arts to prints and drawings, from installations this big as this room to tiny drawings like this. So selection is so much more difficult, you can say, with this kind of exhibitions. That it's almost a different job. This is the Boijmans van Beuningen Museum in Rotterdam. And, well, to compare it with the Rijksmuseum, because when we started, of course, when you make an exhibition like this, and we made it because the Boijmans van Beuningen was closed. That's the main reason why, and the moment Taco Dibbets, our director, heard that it would be closing, he went to the director of the Boijmans and said, I want to make an exhibition. But then he said the curators of the Rijksmuseum should make it. So these are the 2 museums. And, well, I think you can say that the Rijksmuseum, no one has discussion. That's the biggest museum in the Netherlands. The second, there's more discussion. But overall, you can say Rotterdam is the second museum in the Netherlands. But completely different in almost everything. The Rijksmuseum is a city... is a state-owned museum built in 1885. It's so the high days of nationalism, and in every tile there is Dutch nationalism. This is to show, of course, Dutch art from the 14th till the 20s at this moment, but the core is the 17th century. I will show you some slides. I don't know if you have been there, but if you have not been, the main gallery, the Eregalerij, the Gallery of Honor, it's a kind of church with chapels on either side. And on the high altar is the Night Watch of Rembrandt. So it's really everything. And also, if you look at these ship models and so, it's about Dutch history, it's about Dutch art. Now here you see again the Gallery of Honor. The Rijksmuseum, the Museum Boijmans van Beuningen is quite an old museum, already 1849. But it's had its high days in the 20th century and certainly between the 2 world wars. This building was made in 1935, and the curious name, Boijmans van Beuningen, these are 2 collectors, and that does say everything about this collection of this museum, because it's almost all made up of private collections. So small paintings, and what is perhaps more important, far more international. So the only Titian in the Netherlands you will find in in Rotterdam, the only Dürer painting in Rotterdam, the only Watteau, and so I can continue and continue. And the other thing is they have collected contemporary art from the 1950s onwards on a huge scale. So it's in one way far more an American museum, where there's far more a tradition to show all art through all ages and to collect things. And then I think there has been a taste in the Boijmans to, and a belief also with quite a lot of directors that it doesn't matter where it comes from or from what age. It's about a kind of quality. And of course, that's in discussion now, what is quality? But I think I still grew up in a kind of idea what quality was, and that you can, if you are, that you can taste it or can feel it. And this collection is very typical of it. And also the whole building, it has the same kind of feeling. So it's elegant, it's small paintings, it's a city museum, so really in every way different from the Rijksmuseum. So, of course, from the start, it was clear that we should stress these differences. But then, of course, the following ways, but what do you want to show? It should also be different in one way from what is shown in Boijmans, because it's an hour away, Amsterdam from Rotterdam. So it should, and if you take all the time and effort to show that exhibition in Amsterdam, it should be different from anything. It should not be comparable to things in Rotterdam. Here, the depot was just opened very recently, and so this is, and it shows also really a different view of architecture. And these are the interior rooms, and that's quite important also for the design we made for the exhibition. It's comparable. So this is the grouping. As said, I did it with 5 other curators. These are 2, Ilona van Tuinen and Ludo van Halen. He's the 20th century curator, and she is the head of prints and drawings. And it shows one of the best parts of the preparation, because after we had found out what the grouping more or less should be, we had them made on scale and cut out. And then we did things like this. And really every room should have its own feeling, we thought. And, but because they are so different in scale and material, it was so difficult to find out what would work. And so this was the first things we did to get a grip on it. Before I will give you a small overview of what the grouping got at the end to be. We started with the idea of, well, chronology, why not? From the Middle Ages till now. But it was so boring and not interesting. And then we thought, what should it be? And of course, because the Rotterdam collection is such a beautiful overview internationally and from, say, 1400 till the present, it was logical to make it transhistorical, so that you shouldn't do it chronological, but to combine things in one room of different ages. But then, of course, is how should you combine it? What is a good way to do it? And that took us most time, I think. And at a moment we came with different emotions. And that's nice, but it is also, it forces the audience very much in one direction. Art in itself is not going to one direction. It should be not that clear. So we thought emotions pure, that's not a good way. But it should be open to the public to feel what they want to feel. But on the other hand, we can give them a hand. And at the end, we came with a kind of journey of life. So it's a huge team, life. But on the other hand, it's remarkable that all art, and we, or at least I, tend to forget it sometimes, but art in itself is always related to us. We can only relate to art because it's related to what we experience. So that's, of course, also the core point why we still can love things from the 15th and from the 20th century. But so life, the path of life, is essential for everything in art too. So that was the idea behind it. And now I will show you an overview of the groupings of the... are the same rooms where the Frans Hals exhibition will be. It starts already outside with the sculpture, you can call it, Breeze Walk Die, from a Swiss present artist, Ugo Rondinone. And in fact, we, the curators, wanted to call the exhibition itself Breeze Walk Die, because that's exactly where the exhibition is about. But Boijmans said, no way. The mentioning of the name of Boijmans should be the title of the exhibition. And of course, they lent the whole collection, so it was not Breeze Walk Die. But of course, it's nice there. You can see it from the outside. It's nice as an introduction to the whole exhibition. So this is the first room. We have thought also about mentioning of the rooms. First, we had more general names, so this was called Introduction, and then we had the beginning, and then we had sex or violence. But also that forces you already quite a lot into a kind of direction. So at the end, we decided to give it the name of one of the major paintings in that room. So the Peddler is the name of the title of this painting of Jeronius Bos, one of the icons of that collection. And that's, of course, also nice to start with. About Bos paintings, you can discuss always, but almost all scholars agree that this Peddler shows a journey of life, in fact. In the Middle Ages, you have the life is compared to a pilgrimage. And it's clearly that this Peddler is walking and he's passing a brothel, but we don't know. Will he return? Has he been there, or does he skip the brothel? And where does he go to? Will he go left or another way? So, of course, in Bos times, this is moralistic. This is about the Christian belief. But every person, you have your DNA, your upbringing, but afterward, you have to decide yourself still what kind of way of life you will do. So that's the reason why he hangs there. And the other way is a sculpture by Marisol, a pop art artist, female artist from Paris, but born in Venezuela. And it's big, and there comes music out of it. There's a radio tuning. But the nice thing also is the persons in the car are all self-portraits in other figurations of Marisol. So she shows herself in different roles, more or less. And of course, that's exactly what you do in your life. So that's the reason why we showed them together. The second room is New Generation. That's more or less by birth. We first start at the beginning. New Generation is the title of this work of Jan Toorop. And I hope you can see. You see a child in a chair, and that's Charlie Toorop, also a famous artist herself. But then she's 2 years old. And in front, you see an electric pole and the train rails, do you call it? No. Well, the things of the train. So in one way, it's very positive. It's the modern time. But if you go to the woods, there are ghosts, so it's also scary. And of course, with the beginning, there's also a kind of fear. And that you have, of course, in other paintings too. Especially in the Rubens, that's Thetis who dips Achilles in the Styx. And she hopes, of course, that he will not be vulnerable. They have said he will die early, Achilles. And she tries to event this, to stick him in the sticks, and so that he would. But of course, it's in vain. But of course, with birth, fear starts, and this is a very nice example. The other thing is a balloon of Manzoni, And as said, we wanted to call the title Breathe, Walk, Die, and this is the breath of the artist, so it's a nice beginning. Without breath, we can't stay alive. Others speak more for themselves, like a huge Kate Coleridge and a beautiful Georg Miller. The Boijmans has such incredible, beautiful artworks that it was also in one way easy to start. This is the next room, and this is about, say, children between 12 and 20. So when they grew up, when they become aware of being a human, but also with all the problems, with being mortal. This is called Uses in Art, and that's, I only show you 9, but this is a series of more than 120 photographs of Daan van Golde, a Rotterdam artist, who made photographs of his daughter from her birth to her 18th year. So it's a complete overview of use. Well, some of the major paintings of the Boijmans are hanging in this room, like the Titus Rembrandt, there he is, and Van Gogh, a beautiful painting, I think, of the son of the famous postman, but he's about 16 or 17. So, and these are 2 photographs of a recent contemporary artist, Désiré de Ron. This is, I think, also very nice. This is a table called My Place at Table, it's called, by Anna, a Rotterdam artist. And you see it's embroidered very beautifully, but on one side it goes completely wrong and it's black, it's not colorful. And so that's her place at table. And of course, when you grow up, you become aware that your place might be not that convenient in your family, but also perhaps in the world. So this kind of works are not as direct as others, but we wanted to have this kind of things in between to let the audience think a little bit more, or why in heaven's name is it here? Just to show you some other examples. Here, this is Munch, Degas, and Schwarze. And I told you, with the Hals exhibition, we know beforehand where everything will hang. With this exhibition, we said from the start, we want to be able to remove things at the end. So here, for example, this room, we had everything unpacked and put to the wall, and then we changed everything. And for example, the Schwarze didn't fit and went out. And so I think more than 12 or 14 paintings went out of the exhibition. And that is for contemporary art exhibitions rather normal, also for the Boijmans, but for the Rijksmuseum, this was really something. For old masters, you don't do it. You don't ask Frans Hals from the Metropolitan and say, oh no, it doesn't fit. You can't do it. But with the Boijmans, we already discussed beforehand that it would be possible. And if you make an exhibition like this, where the unity of the room is so important, you can't do otherwise almost. This is also still the same room. Now we go to what we first called fear and anger and frightfulness, but we renamed it as the Shooting Gallery, which is a big painting by Pijke Koch, an artist of the Netherlands from the 1930s. This is Cornelis van Haarlem. But the most important thing in that room is the Bruce Nauman double steel cage, and you can go inside, but it's very small, so it's really scary to go in. And other paintings are an enormous Kiefer, but also a rather unknown painting by Geert ter Borch of flagellants and a patineer with Sodom and Gomorrah. Next to the Bruce Nauman are these fashion clothes by Alicia Frames, also a Dutch artist. And they are based on very famous fashion brands like Chanel and so on, but they are made of Kevlar. And it is also called anti-dog, so they can resist dog bites. So it becomes completely different and also a little bit scary and frightful, and of course also about, well, other things. Then we come, 5, 6 are about sex, erotics, and so on. This is called Finally Chest Hair because of this T-shirt by Walter van der Berendonck, a fashion designer. And on the back it says Finally Chest Hair. So if you don't have chest hair, you can put on this. And I think it's... but the room is almost completely taken in with the Kusama, one of her infinity mirror rooms. And it's a separate space, 5 by 5 meters, where you can go in. And there you see all phalluses with red dots. And this is a Picabia, which is in front of that door. In the other room, it continues. It's called Venus and Amor, after a drawing by Holtjes. There are beautiful Rubens sketches. This is a bronze by Jan Bologna. This is a piece of chocolate by Paul McCartney. And this is a very famous sculpture in Rotterdam. It's huge, it's 5 meters. It's called Santa Claus. And in first instant, you might think this is a Christmas tree he has in his hands, but it's a butt plug. So it's really something different. This is also quite clear. Sarah Lucas, which is enormous. It's taking an enormous wall. And for the Rijksmuseum, this is really new. So after this, say, more in-your-face galleries, we wanted to have more quiet rooms. Of course, when you think of that idea of a path of life, you will never come with quiet, of the path of life, you will never come, I think, directly with quiet life. But the collection of the Boijmans has a kind of tradition to collect this kind of quiet paintings in a way. There was a kind of taste, at least with 3 or 4 directors, for this quiet kind of paintings. And of course, this room is about how everyday life can sometimes be extremely beautiful. An artist can point you at things which are beautiful. They can point you to look at this shadow or look at that bread. It's so beautiful. And most of the time you walk next to it and you don't see it even. But because of those artists, you are risen almost a little bit. You feel like a little bit heavenly in our own world. It can. And thanks to artists, sometimes more often than not. And as I said, the directors like this kind of quiet works. Typically, I think it's this Hockney, which is very atypical, but it's a very quiet painting in one way. This is a Redon and a Hammershøi, which was acquired just 3 or 4 years ago. One of the most famous 17th century paintings in Zaandam, but also a very beautiful Mondrian and a Monet. And in the middle, there are cups by Geert Lat, so very sober cups. And you have 5 paintings by Onkawara. And during some time, Onkawara painted every day a painting of the date of that day thing. And so it's just very, it's almost nothing, but it's very beautiful done. So 5 of these dates are there, and of course shows the beauty of a day. Then this is again the small room where the small houses are. And the Boijmans has one of perhaps the most beautiful collection of drawings in the Netherlands, also going through all ages, from Pisanello to 12 watercolors by Cézanne and so on. So this room is about watercolors, but it's also about intimacy. So there's one painting by Westrik called Hand Kiss, so that's the center. But what we show as drawings are Ingres, an incredible Rubens, that's the most beautiful Rubens drawing existing, a Fragonard, a beautiful Fra Bartolomeo, Watteau, Tiepolo, Dürer, and in the middle there is by Gober a small wax shoe with human hair. Intimacy is of course often very nice, but it can also a little be not so attractive and so, and this is certainly not attractive. Then in the large room there's a 10-screen video by Fudong, Yang Fudong, a Chinese artist. this is a cruel video with very scary, but very impressive. And of course we wanted to have a video or something as a symbol of the modern art collection, of their important collection of videos. Then almost the last room is this room with the Breugel and Stanley Brown. And this is about humankind who wants to build things, who wants to make things, and we can't do otherwise. But in one way we know it doesn't make sense at all, but we have to in one way. And the Babel is clear, but this Stanley Brown, he made drawings of 1 meter, and I think there are 20 lines on one paper, and then he made 1 kilometer of drawings. So all those maps are full of drawings of lines. So it shows incredible lot of ambition, and he wants to do things, but on the other hand, you can say, wow, where is this for? The last room is about the end. We called it at the beginning, but now we call it Content with Your Fate. It's a Goya drawing, and that's the name of that Goya drawing, and it's an old lady who is dancing. So she will enter life dancing. That's a nice way to enter life. Of course, it can be different. So the other 2 works of art are Christopher Wool, and this is, if you read the text, it's very sober. So the show is over, people collect their mantles, but at the end there are no coats and there are no homes. So this is a beautiful painting by De Ket, a Dutch artist, and if you read in the memory, it's very difficult to read, but there are the words fin, French for end. And De Ket was an artist who had an illness, and he knew that he would die very early. And I think it's a very moving painting. He also sticks to the face with the flower, and also the bowl is extremely beautifully painted. So he stresses how beautiful the world is in one way, and he wants to get it, to grip it, and that makes it, I think, one of the very beautiful painting and a beautiful end of the show. Do we have time, or should I stop?
Well, not much time.
No, wow. I'll just go through the design, because this is what I told you with Wilmot. It said I sent some things to Paris and then we got something back. This was a real discussion with a young designer, architect in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam. And so we made a model of all the rooms and discussed everything. We had the colors. This is the Vermeer exhibition was going on, and so we discussed the colors. And here I just give you some overviews how it looked like at the end. This how you, and this is I liked very much. So this is the Titus who looks at Degas. They are both 14 years old, we know. So and it looks as if the young boy looks at the young girl. These are the Alicia Frames with the shooting tent. This is Alicia Frames herself. This is the lab with the and this is the Goya at the end. I will stop, I think. That's, yeah. Well, now let me, because I think I have to explain a little bit new audiences. What are new audiences? I think for every exhibition, there is a new audience. We change all the time, and what I wanted to stress, but I didn't at the end. Of course, we all discuss and think about the cruelty of this world, certainly at this moment. And then you think, why should we do this kind of work? But I think at the end we should believe in artworks, and in artworks, the real artworks, and in this kind of combinations. But also in the Frans Hals exhibition, where you show an artist in its completeness. You hope to show how important these artworks are in the past, in the present, and the beautiful thing, the Hals exhibition puts art in history. That art is always related to at the time where it comes from, but the Boymans exhibition is, of course, not about history at all. It's about the experience we have, and that it can continue through all the ages. That's more or less it.
Thank you. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. And you actually made very clear to the audience members the complexity of the decision-making process, that it is a negotiated process, but also the fact that there are multiple dimensions that need to be taken into consideration. And you actually need to make simultaneous decisions on a number of things. And in particular, some of the dimensions that you identified, I mean, I would start with the degree of consistency. The Frans Hals exhibition is fairly consistent, internally consistent. This one in Rotterdam obviously is very heterogeneous, you know, so you do need to make a decision on this, you know, the extent of consistency or complementarity that you're looking for in an exhibition. And I believe this is not an easy choice, also because it is connected to the question of the audience, and that's the question that you brought up at the end. Is it the case that you know, more consistent stylistically exhibitions generally cater to older audiences, while more heterogeneous stylistically heterogeneous cater to new audiences, so it's a bit more complicated?
Yeah, that's what we think.
Yeah.
But of course, also the Rotterdam exhibition, and we even, with the audio tour, was for young people, there was even an audio tour with a kind of soundscapes by a famous DJ. So we really wanted to attend a new public. But on the other hand, I think one of the nice things of that exhibition, if you, I thought it goes through all ages, but if you recognize that it comes from those different ages and say, oh, this is 80-80 and this is, then I think the exhibition becomes more interesting. So then, hey, I can suggest this is for a public which doesn't know that much about art. But on the other hand, perhaps it does know. If you do know more about art, I think it becomes a more interesting.
And I'm curious, when it comes to statistically heterogeneous exhibitions, do they require more resources? Does it take more time to organize? Also, because there's no clear template for this, so you know you do need to make more decisions. Are they more expensive?
Yeah, no, not more than that. But this is one collection, so that this is traveling costs and so on. Insurance cost is far less than Frans Hals. Yeah. But to find out the grouping, the selection was the most difficult and took most time. And that's the reason why it was so good to have 5 curators, because we discussed everything. And with this kind of exhibition, there is a tradition already from the 1980s onwards, but most of them are very associative. They are more about feeling. And when I discussed it with my director, the plan of the Boymans, who made quite a lot of this kind of exhibitions, he said, no, this is far too. He thought the path of life, no, that's too much. You have to do it only on your feeling. And the good thing with making an exhibition like this with 5 is that we all had to agree that it makes sense in that room. So it's not only personal, we thought. If 5 people agree that it fits in this room, it's more than only personal. And we thought that was important. Yeah. But there are traditions, certainly in the Netherlands, but also in Germany and so on, that you shouldn't understand the combinations more or less. You should only feel them. And I think that's a step too far for the Rijksmuseum and also for me. I can't make this kind of exhibition. Yeah.
You mentioned risk that as a concept, and I'm just curious, I mean, is this a decision that you make early on in the process, like the degree of risk that you're going to take? Like we can take a bit more risk with this exhibition or not, or this is something that evolves in the working process? Is it a conscientious decision in the beginning, or is it something that basically just kind of unfolds naturally? How much risk we are going to take this? Because what you demonstrated in Rotterdam is actually still pretty high level of risk.
Well, this evolves because we started with the idea of chronology, masterworks, but then also our director is important. He said, I was not even there, and then they proposed that chronological. So, no, this doesn't make sense in the Netherlands, in the Rijksmuseum. Come on, we should make something different, and then we could go ahead. So you need this kind of discussions also with your director. So he wanted to take risks. And of course, there are also other things at stake. With Frans Hals, that's an expensive exhibition together with other major museums. I think it's logic to be more traditional in that kind of way. And it's also my preference. And with this kind of exhibitions, which attract less public, that's not the most important thing. But you can take more risk, or you can find other ways, I think, also. And I think the nice thing of the Rijksmuseum is that there is place for both of them. But this was for the Rijksmuseum quite special. Yeah.
I also have a question regarding the transhistorical approach of the Rotterdam collection in the Rijks context. To me, art, but also exhibitions, are communicative devices. They are packed with a lot of experiences that are being communicated, but they're also reflective devices that reflect our own experiences, as you said. Isn't it a bit too much to have so many focal points and different experiences packed in one exhibit? That's a question. And also, have you observed how do audiences behave in such a densely emotional kind of space or exhibition space? Because they go through one emotion or one set of experiences in this room, and then completely different set in that room, and then completely different set in the third room. Do they focus on one or two rooms, and then they leave, or they go through everything? I'm interested in the behavior of the audience.
Well, they go through everything, but one thing is, I made quite a lot of exhibitions, but I never have so many reactions by email and so on. Of course, newspapers, that's all. But the people who took the effort to write me, I never had so many. And some said, "Oh, that room, I hate it. That's come on, second quality. This paint, you can't." But I was completely overwhelmed with this painting or that combination. So the effect we want to have, so that it gets to your emotion, we got. And from the start, we also said, well, come on, critics, we want to hear you. Of course, it's nice to because it's so different from everything. In fact, we expected more criticism than we got. So and I think because the layout is very the same, more or less. I think there is a unity in the whole exhibition, and another thing is, of course, you never should forget that the emotions you get from art are comparable to emotions you get from real life, but are different. They are on another level. We can speak about death or fear or so, but it's aestheticized in one way. It's another emotion. It's comparable, but it's different. So that's the reason that you can walk through it, and it's like an opera. The most cruel things happen, but it's beautiful. And this is the same with this kind of thing. It can be cruel, the Bruce Nauman and so, but it's in another way it's beautiful. And so in that way it remains together, I think.
And do you think that this pioneering approach for the Rijks context would have follow-up in transhistorical exhibitions?
I hope so, but I must say it took us quite an effort to find a good solution for it. And well, quite a lot of people said, "Oh, but then we can make at least 6 or 7 other similar exhibitions about the Boymans collection." That's true, but it's to Path of Life seems easy and logical, and we were very happy to find it out. And there must be others, but it will take some time. And I hope I think you, of course, perhaps I'm too negative, but the historical idea of art and so is under pressure, and let's put it that way, and art can survive also old art if you show it that it's still valid for today. And of course, and if you combine those things, whatever you think of this exhibition, if you go to this museum, you will certainly find within these 90 things an artwork you love. and where you get some emotions from. These are all such beautiful things. Yeah, perhaps it's a way to get the attention of the public also in times where perhaps art history is not that popular anymore.
Perhaps the audience has questions. Anyone? Responses, questions?
I'd like to ask a question. Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. So my question was provoked by something you said at the very beginning of your presentation, and it was about the difficulty when creating an exhibition like the Franz Houses one, because there are artists and painters that are so well known, so famous, that many people would roll their eyes and they'd say, oh, not that guy again. So what are the challenges that are standing in front of the future curators that are about to create the next, for example, Caravaggio's or Franz Houses exhibition in 10 years, for example?
Yeah, find a good team, and that sounds easy, but it isn't. And so I said that the Franz Hals is the third in the triptych, and Rembrandt was not the whole Rembrandt, but the late Rembrandt, and this, of course, are perhaps his most beautiful things. So and with Rembrandt you have to choose, and with Rubens you can't show everything. That's too much. So you have to pick up things. And for Rubens, that's perhaps a good example. There are 4 Rubens exhibitions every year almost throughout Europe and the States. And one is about diplomacy. One is about his idea of female, of women. One was about the sketches and so on and so on. So there are, of course, different ways. And I think there you can also, you should be aware of your audience. You don't have to make the show for the audience, but you have to be aware of your audience in one way. And what is at stake at present, I think, then, if that's in the team in one way in that exhibition, you're on the right way. If it's valid for today. So diplomacy and Rubens, I thought, whoa, what's this? But at that moment, with all those, if you put it in the right way, within the world with diplomacy and how he behaved, like, I thought it was a wonderful team. And you look at those paintings differently, and that's, of course, what you wanted to have. And for Caravaggio, well, think about it. That's it. No, but it must be possible. It must certainly be possible. But you have to step out of traditional art historical teams.
Anyone else, please? Last moments to ask big questions. Challenges?
Suggestions?
After the last question, I was thinking, could you say something about what a painting does in the context of other paintings illustrating Frans Hals's development, or what he did, or how beautiful his art was, but in that context, and a painting like the Breugel or the Bosch, who is in a completely different context, which also makes it work in a different way. And so, I mean, what the purpose of an exhibition does to the works on display.
Yeah, but that's, I think, one of the key reasons why you make exhibitions, and why also we wanted to have the Frans Hals paintings not in the Frans Hals, but in the Rijks. The moment you bring them from Haarlem to another space, they become other paintings. It was, for me, very directly clear when I saw the view of Delft or Vermeer in Amsterdam. It looked like a different painting. So it's already the rooms make another painting, and of course, when the differences within a room are big, you can look, I think, in completely different way to works of art. It can also become too much, or you think, come on, or that you start to detest it, or this is too artificial, or doesn't work. That's the danger. With Hals, I think we hope. I think that you feel a little bit how an artist thinks with one or two paintings. That's difficult, but if you see his work from the start till the end, if you see 50 of his paintings, you see how he works, how he thinks about it, and how he resolves problems, and next to each other. If you have Hals likes this kind of portraits. I think there are at least a dozen of persons who are looking this way, but he does it differently. And when the brushstroke is very refined, it's completely different from his late, where he has the same position. So if people start to think about this kind of thing, that style is very influential on how you relate to a painting. It's not only the position, and this kind of thing, then you have success. Then you have succeeded in your goal, I think.
Just before this panel, we had another panel which was dedicated to digital art. So just can you say a little bit about the kind of latest developments in the Rijksmuseum or Boymans as to digital developments and maybe integration of digital art in exhibitions?
Well, we have a director who hates digital things within the exhibition, and I agree fully. And I think one of the things, and I had the digital development is very important, I think, also for this kind of exhibitions. Because if you want to see a painting or a sculpture in detail, till the tiniest detail, go to your computer and look at it. You don't need to go to the museum. If you want to taste real artwork, go to the museum. But then this kind of exhibitions, where it's more about the whole room, I think that's the way museums should go, because it's more a feeling what you get in the museum, which becomes even more important. Of course, it was always important, but it becomes even more important because all those images are available. So for just one painting, you don't go there. So it's the whole room, the whole museum, the feeling of it, which is important, makes it. So that's one thing, and of course. I think the Rijksmuseum is doing marvelously with all the everything is for free, all the digital images. The night watch is now available. That's completely incredible. It's really, if you look through a microscope, you can enlarge them to. It's completely amazing, and that will go on. And also that you can compare it with the X-ray yourself and with other things. So. That's continued all the time, and as said, I come from a very quite small museum. It's incomparable what the Rijksmuseum has. There are more than 1,100 people working there, which is it's really enormous, and there is and they are doing very well. And so they are in the forefront also of digital things and this kind. But so. It's really seen as a separate thing. It's helpful. It's very interesting, and it's certainly for the website. The visitors are just as important as the real visitors. There you should engage them with digital things. But we are very much in favor of having the original things without this digital stuff.
I think they are more like parallel universes. The presentation that we had with MP Studio, Vincent meets Rembrandt in the Noorderkerk in Amsterdam. They created an experience, a wholesome experience on its own, which cannot compete. It's really something in itself as an artistic experience in the way they use and adapt and create a narrative, use and adapt images and create a narrative with them. So it would be very difficult probably to imagine it as part of the physical space of the museum with the objects. But I wonder, audiences change all the time, and you emphasized how each exhibit is trying to make art relevant to the current moment. Now, you also said that exhibitions are not made for a specific audience, but with a specific audience in mind. So, given the fact that we are dealing with a digital generation that has been used to the mobile devices, digital experiences, visual experiences, how does the Rijksmuseum cultivate or provoke or create a slow-looking, slow experience of art? I mean, do you have special programs for slow-looking or more traditional approaches, or do you not see any changes in the difference in the new generations?
Well, it's difficult to get the new generations, but the Rijksmuseum is in one way different from other Dutch museums because we got a lot of tourists and they are young. So I think in Boijmans the average was 60 or so, but that's much lower in the Rijksmuseum, but because of the tourists. This kind of exhibitions are not primarily made for the tourists, but Dutch audience in Hals and for me, and so also for a larger audience. But then the age also of this, of course, there were younger people. So we should do it. We should try to do it. We should think all the time about it. And of course, when we make an exhibition like this, there are young curators, old curators, educational department with young people, old people. So that's one way to do it. On the other way, you should remain confident in yourself in one way. If you only think about the audience and think, oh, what should they like? I think that's the most dangerous thing you could do. You have to start from yourself and say, this I like, and this I want them to like too. And I think, I can't do it otherwise. And I think you look at political parties, at least in the Netherlands, they only look at, what do they think? So you miss even a kind of idea behind a political party. And I think it's the same with exhibition makers. You should, in the first instance, believe it yourself. And even if some people call it extremely old-fashioned, what the hell? It's still your time, and be confident in it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Really, final word, final question, reaction. We're almost finished with the time for today.
Nice tulips.
Amsterdam.
Just a quick question. Are you sure about the Fisher Boy? Because I don't know. I have my doubts about the Fisher Boy.
No, I'm
sure about the Fisher Boy?
We will do research on it, but I'm 100% confident that it's
okay.
But it's exactly what almost everybody has.
Yeah.
It's very
absolutely.
It's very strange. Yeah.
It's very strange.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Friso.
You're welcome.
Thank you for the detailed, wonderful explanation, tracking of the process of creating an exhibit, the process of generating ideas, adapting, developing those ideas into a final product and experience into the audience's hands and eyes. We really appreciate both yours and NBU Studios' experience, and everyone else. Thank you very much for coming, sharing with us your ideas about art as a communicative medium, art as a personal expression, art as a resource of self-reflection. These are all very important angles from which we look at art and the way we use art. In a sense, art literally reflects our culture. It's an instrument of our culture to reflect on its own, on itself. So that's, in a way, the key idea of our whole project in the Mirror of Rembrandt. to generate an environment in which we share ideas, provoke thoughts, ask questions, and in a sense create a shared space. You arrived yesterday from the Netherlands. MP Studios, they're traveling all around the world. We found time where both of you can be here. And of course, artists are traveling in their imagination all over. So we share different spaces. We shared at this moment today various insights. We enriched each other. And I hope this will stay something with you. We at the New Bulgarian University, at the UniArt Gallery, we will continue in this direction, maybe looking for new ideas. Already some are budding now and will bring fruit. But we hope that today's gathering, today's generous sharing of those ideas will stay with us, and in one way or another will encourage us to think, each of us in our own direction, but also each of us in the direction together, making art a vital part of our culture. Thank you very much. Perhaps Stoyan has a few words to say.
Not really. I agree with everything you said, and it's been a tremendous pleasure and honor to be involved in this project, and we are very much hopeful that there will be a next edition and that we will continue in the next years. So thank you all for being here, and hope to see some of you or all of you next year. So thank you so much, and thanks as well to, once again, to Sofia University, and thanks to the guests, and I think that's about it for the first edition of our fest.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you.